You know what still gets under my skin about Invincible? It's not the blood, not the fights, not even that scene where Omni-Man wipes the pavement with Mark in Season 1. What really hits me is the thought that, out there, in all those endless universes, almost every Mark Grayson turns out a villain, almost every single one. And only the original somehow stays human, at least, as far as we know, in the one reality we've actually seen. The Invincible War showed what happens to a superhero when he lets the darkness inside take over. We saw how each of them, driven by ego, became a weapon for Angstrom Levy. And it's worth noting, the mad scientist skillfully pulls their strings, playing on their desires and weaknesses. One just wants to get his mom back, and doesn't hesitate to send someone else's parents to the grave to make it happen. Others dream of expanding the borders of their own empires. But all of that, it pales, compared to what really matters. Each of them puts their own interests above the highest value in this world, human life itself. Why do so many paths lead to darkness, and only one to the light? And what the hell makes the original so different from all the others? Why do almost every version of Mark turn into conquerors, while only the original stands on the side of humanity? We've seen how the Graysons, chasing ever more power, lose their humanity. And the contrast with the original is staggering. He balances physical strength with morality, doubts, and, of course, responsibility. He doesn't become a blind slave to his powers, because he fully understands. With great power comes great responsibility. During the war, more than 20 versions of Invincible were involved, each meant to wipe cities off the map, just to cast a bloody shadow over the superhero's reputation, to make every single person on Earth hate him and curse him with all their might. By the way, I made a separate video about each of them. I'd be glad if you checked them out. Some of the Invincibles had one thing in common. Their powers awakened in childhood, and Omni-Man molded them in his image. He trained them to be strong, ruthless, and devoted to a greater purpose. That's how Nolan raised the Conqueror's blood in them. But the moment came when each Mark realized just how wide the gap was between them and ordinary mortals. They understood that they could use their powers for personal gain, reshape the world however they wanted. And that's why they all chose the language of violence in dealing with the world, instead of channeling their strength into the creative power of love. But with the original, things were different. Instead of being subjected to a propaganda of cruelty from childhood, Mark's powers didn't awaken until he was 17. That late awakening actually worked in his favor. Without it, Omni-Man couldn't have started training him or instilled the cult of power in his son. So, the first factor is timing. Most Marks got immersed in Viltrumite culture too early. They never had the chance to fully appreciate what it means to be human, school, games, first crushes, failures, and successes, hanging out with friends. A lack of social interaction robbed them of the lessons that teach empathy. Instead of a normal human childhood, they plunged headfirst into training, facing the stern face of their father, repeating, "You're not human, son, you're a Viltrumite." That's how Omni-Man drew a clear line. True Viltrumites aren't meant to experience human emotions, joys, or fears. And without any of that, well, you can imagine, you can't become a fully functioning member of society. So, 17 years, that's a whole human lifetime. By the way, psychologists call this the period of forming basic moral principles. Morality develops exclusively through social interaction. Mark had the chance to live among humans, learn to empathize, and form attachments. By the way, Viltrumites don't develop the same strong bonds with their peers as humans do, something Conquest even noted. So when Nolan revealed the truth about the Viltrumite mission, Mark already had his own moral backbone and wasn't nearly as susceptible to his father's ideas. No less important in shaping the hero was the image of his mother. Debbie Grayson is, in fact, a key figure in Mark's life. She loves her son and accepts him as he is. Debbie becomes a moral compass for the superhero. We've already seen how an alternate version of Mark was willing to compromise his conscience just to get his mom back. Losing someone so dear that Mark started seeing emotions and feelings as a weakness. So his psyche resorted to a classic defense mechanism, what's called emotional numbing. A purge happened. To avoid suffering, Invincible killed off his ability to feel, and, with it, to empathize. So Debbie's love and acceptance give the superhero the strength to stay human, even despite the Conqueror's blood raging inside him. It's also worth noting that our Mark constantly endures painful, humiliating defeats. He falls, only to rise again in the end. Why did this factor benefit the superhero so much? In psychology, there's a concept called post-traumatic growth. A phenomenon where pain doesn't just make a person stronger, but also deeper and wiser. By experiencing his own pain, you begin to understand what others feel. And when this is balanced with moral guidance, it brings an understanding of how and when to use one's destructive power. In alternate universes, Mark often wins far too easily. And as you can imagine, without defeats, compassion doesn't develop. Without failures, there's no growth. And without pain, there's no understanding of another's weakness. So, in reality, without defeats, there's no internal break whispering, "Stop. Human life is more important than victory." It's interesting to note here's a paradox. Remember the conversation between Nolan and Mark, when he first revealed the truth that the Viltrumites aren't noble heroes, but ruthless conquerors? That very conversation also helped Mark stay on the side of humanity. The thing is, Omni-Man, not exactly skilled at scheming, used a straight-up, head-on approach. Instead of planting seeds of doubt and wrapping the Viltrumite narrative in a shiny, appealing package, Nolan told him the truth, straight up, which led to rejection. And we know Mark is prone to self-reflection. With the right words, he might have paused, maybe even considered using his power to impose order. Sure, with an iron fist, but still order. But Nolan didn't go that route. At that moment, Mark experienced cognitive dissonance, that painful clash of values, when the mind frantically searches for some saving truth. And his salvation turned out to be simple: to remain human. So all the factors we've mentioned, the late awakening of his powers, which allowed him to build social connections and develop moral guidance, the chain of long, humiliating defeats that taught him to endure pain, summon his last reserves, and face fear and danger, the love and acceptance of his mother, and the straightforwardness of his father, all of this comes together into one unique puzzle. Remove just one of these elements, and the original has every chance of ending up among the most ruthless and vicious versions of the superhero. Our Mark, a static anomaly, he is who he is because the universe gave him a rare set of chances, things the others didn't have. So Mark Grayson's story could have been entirely different with the slightest change in circumstances. The funniest thing? The original Invincible's greatest superpower is staying human, with a capital H, no matter the circumstances. Even though he's half alien, it's precisely his human half, with its moral compass, that saves the universe. Think about it, not fists, not flight speed, but a human heart capable of love, pain, and doubt. That's why Invincible has such a huge and active fan base. Support this episode with a like and a comment to show you agree. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. See you soon!